Welcome to Paulogia and another edition of Ham and Egg News, where we react to Ken Ham reacting to things.
Avery Foley, I'm here today with Dr. Purdom and Bodie Hodge.
Yep, Ken's out today. He's in Florida.
He's in Florida.
Ham and Egg News with no ham? You're really killing the momentum of my theme song here, Ken.
There was an article that we actually blogged about. Well, we didn't really blog about it. Well, you actually did blog about it.
You blogged about it.
We wrote on it.
You did.
Oh, come on. Say blog some more.
I don't have a blog, but I do YouTube all the time.
Jackson Wheat.
Oh, hey, Paul. Whoa, nice place.
Thanks, man. If you're not familiar with Jackson, he's a biology student at LSU who makes the best YouTube videos that you're not watching.
Well, I try to put out factually accurate information across a range of biological topics.
Including whale sex.
Yes, it's true. Paulogia and Shannon Q asked me to do a video on whale sex.
Roll clip.
I'm just not going to talk about whale sex today. That's my New Year's resolution. No whale sex talking.
Oh, I want Jackson Wheat to do a video about it.
Oh, can Jackson do a video about whale sex? Please.
Fine. But only because I like you.
So I had to go look at the technical literature for whale copulation.
Well, it's one of the best videos we've seen all year.
That's nice to hear. Thanks, guys.
And I'll put a link in the description.
I found out about this thing called the Icelandic Phallicological Museum, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a museum in Iceland with animal penises.
Ooh, let me make it up to you. You want to join me for some Answers News?
I mean, sure, I think I can.
Democratic Congressmen again introduced Darwin Day resolutions in House Senate.
So Dr. Nathaniel Jenison, who's a geneticist here at Answers in Genesis, he was interviewed for the article, and I like the way that he summarized it. He said, in other words, Darwin's birthday is a thinly veiled disguise for an elaborate liberal agenda.
A thinly veiled liberal agenda? As though conservatives aren't also allowed to partake in Darwin Day?
It says in the article here, Charles Darwin developed the theory of evolution. Actually, he didn't. Evolution had been around for quite some time beforehand. That was actually one of the pagan ancient Greek beliefs that the Epicureans believed.
No. The Greeks had some vague ideas about evolution. Empedocles had a primitive idea of mutations, and Anaximander thought humans lived inside fish and later moved to land. Similarly, some people say English geologist William Strada Smith came up with the idea of evolution in the form of his principle of faunal succession, but I disagree with this too because he didn't really have a mechanism for it.
It's interesting, they say, well, it provides humanity with a logical and intellectually compelling explanation for the diversity of life on Earth. Actually, not at all. It's very illogical when you actually look at it in the details.
No, it's illogical that you hold up a system, young Earth creationism, that hasn't allowed you to make any verifiable predictions about the past or future, while evolution allows us to make both. Microraptor, Tiktaalik, Diarthrognathus, and Sphecomyrma were all predicted by evolution and found exactly where we predicted them to be in the geologic column.
Yeah.
But actually, most people would, even the evolutionists, would disagree with Darwin's mechanism now.
Yeah.
Darwin's mechanism was natural selection, which not even Answers in Genesis disagrees with. What biologist today thinks natural selection doesn't work?
Celebrating Darwin's achievements. Oh, okay. Can promote a common bond among all the people of the earth. And it's like, well, Darwin was racist, very racist.
Very much.
Oh, Avery, this is a tired old trope among creationists. Darwin was actually very progressive for his time, as was most of his family, being proud English abolitionists. He abhorred slavery and wrote fervently against it, calling slavery in Uruguay a heart-sickening atrocity. He said regarding slavery, quote, "It makes one's blood boil to think that we Englishmen and our American descendants, with their boastful cry of liberty, have been and are so guilty." Close quote. People believed at the time that Africans and white Americans were two different species, but Darwin realized that we're all one species and related by common ancestry. Tell me, Avery, how many people has the biblical idea of the mark of Ham affected?
He wasn't trained to be a scientist either. He was actually trained to be a theologian. Most people don't realize that.
Who cares what he was originally trained to be? Bodie, you were trained as a mechanical engineer, and now you think your opinion on biology and history matters.
With what he was proposing for, a single-celled organism ultimately evolving into what we have today, that's not observable. That's not repeatable.
In and of itself, the process of some microbial ancestor eventuating our own lineage doesn't have to be directly observable for us to know it happened. We look to various independent lines of data, from genetics to homology to biogeography to atavisms to the fossil record, to understand our evolutionary history.
And it's about the interpretation of the evidence. This is things that have happened in the past, and they're interpreting it based on their worldview.
First, interpretating. Second, it's not a matter of solely interpretation. We don't all have the same facts, as the Answers crew opines. It is a fact that creationists ignore or avoid well over half the available relevant technical data. I pointed this out in my video. We all have the same data in Genesis Paradise Lost.
Or the resolution, it says that it's strongly supported by, evolution is strongly supported by the modern understanding of the science of genetics. No, it's not.
Yes, it does. Hundreds of different lines of data within genetics, including nucleotide sequences, pseudogenes, endogenous retroviruses, the vestigial telomeres in chromosome 2, and various homologies like PAX6 for eye development indicate that we share a common ancestor with all other animals. American geneticist Francis Collins, who was the head of the Human Genome Project, said, quote, "It's also now been possible to compare our DNA with that of many other species. The evidence supporting the idea that all living things are descended from a common ancestor is truly overwhelming," close quote.
And I just gave a talk on that today at noon, talking about how we are definitely not related to some sort of common ancestor with the apes.
We're not related to other apes? Really? Is that why geneticists were able to predict that we have one fewer pair of chromosomes than other apes, because that extra pair fused with another? We have the vestigial telomeres to prove this.
I'm glad they interviewed Dr. Jensen, who's also a geneticist. He got his PhD at Harvard, and he actually wrote a book recently called Replacing Darwin.
Book.
And I'll tell you what, from a genetics perspective, he absolutely, utterly destroys an evolutionary worldview.
Yep.
From a genetic perspective? I'm sure you'd know a lot about that, Bodie. If Nathaniel Jensen's book were so prolific, then why has it affected exactly zero change in the scientific community? Is it more likely that Jensen wrote this book to pander to the creationist audience because he can't make it with the actual scientists?
And, this is a tougher read for a lot of people, but it really dives into the details.
I own this book and have been discussing it at length with Shannon Q. And I can assure you that the reason it's a tough read is not because of the complex subject matter, but rather the communication skill of the author.
And he puts forward a testable prediction from a biblical creation standpoint, which is
that's what's
really
great.
cool.
So what is the big testable prediction Nathaniel puts forward?
Can you give an example of what we can predict better?
We can predict the mutation rate. Of all the things they should predict, they should be able to predict the central mechanism of evolution, which is mutations over time.
So from a time frame, a biblical time frame, you make a prediction in regard to what the mutation rate should be. And what you're showing is the mutation rate doesn't fit the millions of years.
It's going way too fast. If today's rates of change have been constant for millennia, for eons of time, these poor species would have mutated their DNA into oblivion.
I have plans to address this book in detail at some point, but basically what you heard him put forth is a repackaged version of the genetic entropy idea, a topic of a recent Creation Today video I published that I'd very much encourage you to check out if this interests you. But the short version is the discovery and admission that mutation rates in most species is very high. Rather than recognizing that this supports evolution, the creationist pretends that because some mutations can be circumstantially negative, that all of nature must be in a genetic slide toward doom. Now, Nathaniel, you've studied this. Why is your idea wrong?
Now, the evolutionist is going to say, well, natural selection will take care of that. I'll say, okay.
That's correct. Natural selection. As Jackson already mentioned, Answers in Genesis fully acknowledges the power of natural selection. So who are we supposed to believe here? Or does it depend on the day? Observable evolution doesn't rely on a predictable rate of positive mutations, just the mechanism by which positive mutations proliferate when they do happen. Case in point, this amazing article from the New York Times last week. There's a new species of crawfish that sprung up in the last 25 years that can be traced back to a specific mutation in a specific individual, causing all of her eggs to be ready to hatch with clones of the mother, no father needed. This single mutation has given this new species such an incredible reproductive advantage that it is taking over European ecosystems in just a few short years. It's simply amazing and completely flies in the face of what Nathaniel's book tries to assert. It's a shame and makes me very sad that Nathaniel's empty hand waving will seem convincing to those who don't understand.
This bill wants to codify evolution as fact, as if scientific facts needed the help of politicians to become reality.
In a country where people choose to not vaccinate their children, to pray over kids instead of taking them to the doctor, to teach kids that the Earth is only 6,000 years old when everything we know about biology tells us this isn't so. Yes, legislation is necessary to get the facts out there.
When it comes to science, let the scientists battle things out.
No, Bodie, the scientists don't disagree. They have battled it out. Evolution won, and over 98% of scientists in the relevant fields accept evolution.
You know that 97% of the scientific community disagrees with you. And those statistics are true. In the scientific community, the numbers are Very different. 97% would say evolution is true.
But a large portion of the American and world population doesn't. Why? Because people don't like truths that contradict their dogma. Because creationists are in many positions of political power throughout the country and have the ability to affect state curricula.
He says creation science doesn't compromise the scientific and academic integrity of education, it advances it. And it really does.
Sorry, Georgia, there is no integrity to creation science, nor does creation science enhance anything. That's why no one in academia is basing predictions on the Bible.
Because it looks at the observable evidence, doesn't try to be deceptive about it, doesn't try to be selective about it, looks at it and shows that it supports actually Scripture and what God says about the past.
Creationism is not selective with its data. Is that why Andrew Snelling wrote an article trying to prove that oil can form naturally quickly, using sources that contradict precisely what he's trying to prove? Is that why you, Georgia, a geneticist, avoid genetics when you're trying to construct familial relationships among organisms? Thou doth protest too much, methinks.
This next one comes from the Friendly Atheist blog.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
Friendly atheist.
Ken Ham, Bill Nye's show is inappropriate for kids because it teaches science. And the second season recently aired, and I got to be one of the people that got to review that.
You got to review it? Or did you just watch it on Netflix like everyone else?
We did not say that it was inappropriate because of science. We said it was inappropriate because it's inappropriate.
Right.
Yes, very
See, that's actually a
inappropriate.
straw man fallacy. They're setting up a false thing to attack.
You mean like precisely how you creationists describe evolution? Like that?
Because the show talked about antibiotic resistance in bacteria. We talked about how that science is just
We
not
have an exhibit on
evolution.
that.
That's right.
It's just not evolution. I think he's
Yeah.
wanting to equate science with evolution.
Yeah,
is
and
what
that's
it's
and that's an equivocation fallacy.
First, change in allele frequencies in populations over time is what's happening in the bacteria, which is the definition of evolution. Second, I'm pretty sure Nye doesn't equate the entirety of science with a subset of science, namely evolution. That sounds like what did Bodie call it? A straw man.
Those bacteria, from antibiotic resistance never changed into goats. They never changed into cows. They're still bacteria.
I think I figured out where Bodie learned the straw man fallacy. People explained to him hundreds of times that no one expects modern bacteria to evolve into goats, and that that's a straw man fallacy. However, his only takeaway from that was the term straw man fallacy.
The Friendly Atheist writes, in Ken Ham's world, it's not science unless it references a giant ark and a talking snake. He clearly hasn't read what we've written. He clearly hasn't been to the Creation Museum of the Ark Encounter.
The Friendly Atheist clearly hasn't been to the Creation Museum. I had a chat with him last month. Have you ever been to Ken Ham's Creation Museum?
Twice. I walked through it.
Encounter and actually honestly looked at what we've written and looked at the things we've...
And what if he had gone in, but still didn't believe you, like Matt Dillahunty and Seth Andrews? What then? Would you say he didn't really read the plaques and displays? And what if he did read the displays? Would you say he didn't really read them?
He's just so desperate to tear down anything related to science. Then why does he employ scientists and have an online peer-reviewed technical journal?
An online peer-reviewed technical journal? Peer-reviewed by non-creationists? Not exactly.
When I see comments like that, the talking snake, stuff like that, you realize, there's a motivation behind that. That's an attacking type of comment. It's meant to smear. That's actually an emotive language fallacy.
It's an emotive language fallacy to point out exactly what the Bible says. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the Bible have a talking snake in the very first book?
Now, here's what's funny. A talking snake? Okay, wait. It was a serpent, number one, not a snake.
It was a serpent, but not a snake? Dictionary.com defines serpent as snake.
Yeah, they believe everything came from nothing. And all the people in the world came from a rock.
Life came from a rock. Brilliant, Bodie. I believe that's another example of what you call the straw man fallacy.
And we get criticized for actual events back in the past.
Yeah, those mean old evolutionists criticize us for asserting that magic is responsible for everything we see in the universe. Clearly, they're the unreasonable ones.
Oldest fossil of missing link dinosaur discovered in Germany. So the title sounds really sensational and really cool. They discovered a missing link dinosaur. Wow.
I agree. It certainly sounds sensational, and I hate that. I hate it when articles make a find seem more important than it actually is.
Keep in mind that we now live in the era of BuzzFeed and clickbait. The people writing the articles that Answers News decides to cover are not scientists. They're reporters in a competitive field and given a random science assignment. Their next paycheck depends on making each routine find seem fascinating and share-worthy.
Also, there's no such thing as a missing link. If it were missing, we wouldn't have it.
What they found was what may be the oldest known specimen of Archaeopteryx, which they say in the article was once thought to be a feathery link between dinosaurs and modern birds.
Yeah, I don't know why the article says this, since paleontologists do still consider Archaeopteryx to be a link between earlier theropods and modern birds. Just see the 2013 paper, A Jurassic Avialan Dinosaur from China Resolves the Early Phylogenetic History of Birds. What I think the article meant to say was that Archaeopteryx was previously considered the only link between avian and non-avian dinosaurs, since that link is now populated by a number of finds, including Aurornis, Anchiornis, and Shautingia. The article even acknowledges this, saying, quote, "When the first Archaeopteryx fossils were discovered in the 19th century, paleontologists recognized the find's mix of avian and reptilian features, such as feathers and a full set of teeth, and declared these raven-sized creatures the earliest known birds. That title was undermined after fossils discovered more recently in Asia suggest that Archaeopteryx was just one of many bird-like dinosaurs to roam the planet," close quote.
So why they call it a missing link dinosaur when it's just a bird and it's been a debunked missing link, I'm not really sure, but...
The fact that it has visible teeth and a long bony tail unlike any modern birds has been debunked? How does that work?
People used to think Archaeopteryx was the missing link between dinosaurs and birds, and then later on discovered that no, it's just a bird. It's not anything linking the two of them.
Wrong, Georgia. Paleontologists now know that Archaeopteryx was just one of a successive series of dinosaur-like birds, not that it isn't a link at all.
And here's what's funny. It's not like this is the first Archaeopteryx that's been found. This is the 12th one.
Yeah.
Correct. It isn't the first one. The first Archaeopteryx was discovered back in 1861. Charles Darwin in Origin of Species, written just 2 years before the discovery, described the concept of common ancestry, predicting that we should find some ancestor of birds that link them to other animals. Surely enough, we did.
Now, this thing was buried in flood sediment. It was in Jurassic sediment.
This is flood sediment? First, how did you determine that? Second, how do you partition layers of flood sediment? The flood would have mixed all the fossils together, but we see from paleontology that the Jurassic was a climatologically different world from the Triassic, and still a different world from the Cretaceous. If we have to cram each of the accepted geologic ages into your young Earth model, then we get startling results. Is the entire world turning over most, if not all, of its flora and fauna every few hundred years? Sorry to break it to you, Bodie, but that's not observable science.
Dr. Alan Fiducia. Here's what he says. As a paleo bird expert, he says, paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird, a perching bird, and no amount of paleobabble is going to change that. He's been dealing with this for quite some time. He's never changed his position. It's just a bird.
Well, I have to say, Bodie, I'm delighted that you brought up Alan Fiducia. Fiducia is a paleoornithologist who, yes, disagrees with the general scientific consensus on the origin of birds. Most paleontologists maintain that birds are a subset of theropod dinosaurs due to a number of different lines of evidence, such as the previously mentioned fossils, the frame shift hypothesis, the fact that the theory of theropod bird ancestry was used to predict the existence of Microraptor, and various other things. However, Fiducia doesn't say that birds didn't evolve. Quite the opposite. He claims that birds share a common ancestor with dinosaurs, so I don't really understand why creationists are so quick to cite him. Also, how long he's been doing work doesn't matter if he's not going to accept any data contrary to his position.
It's because it has teeth and it has claws, but there are other organisms that even today that have that.
There's a number of ancient birds.
Penguins have teeth.
Right.
No, Avery. Penguins don't have teeth. They have little barbs in their mouth for swallowing prey, but no teeth. Maybe you should just stick to your degree in theological studies and leave the biology to people who actually understand it.
Yeah, there's a number of ancient birds that had teeth.
Ancient birds.
And they've actually been able to identify the gene, and all these birds have this gene, even modern birds.
You've got to be kidding me. No modern birds have teeth, but some very ancient birds do have teeth. Is it a coincidence that none of those toothed birds are still around today? Maybe that's because they were the link between theropods with teeth and birds without.
They talk about this being the earliest one, but there are other birds, like even they found in the fossil records, along with the dinosaurs. So
parrots and flamingos and owls.
Yeah, they found all sorts of birds.
Regular
buried with
old
the
birds.
dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yes, the ancestors of many modern birds were in the Mesozoic. So what? They don't precede Archaeopteryx, Aurornis, Anchiornis, Shautingia, or the earliest long-tailed birds. That says something. If we found robins and cuckoos in the same strata as Archaeopteryx, that would be important.
And we expect them to be higher up in the fossil record because they're more mobile, they can fly.
They can fly, so they outflew the floodwaters? It doesn't bother you that not a single bird without a bony tail precedes the bony-tailed birds? Even the birds that can't fly? It also doesn't bother you that a single giant flood doesn't in any way correlate with the large diversity and burial patterns of different organisms throughout the geologic column?
So here's these rock layers. They look at these particular index fossils. They're looking at them from a naturalistic evolutionary perspective, and then they use that to try to prove that this thing is so many millions of years old.
Bodie, you were doing so well for a moment there. Indeed, index fossils are the remains of organisms that correspond to specific times and/or climatic conditions. They are a type of what is known as relative dating. For instance, if you find a trilobite with another fossil of unknown age, then you can immediately know that the fossil is between 540 and 250 million years old. Then you can use radiometric dating to get a more accurate date. Now, the whole reason index fossils exist is that the flood didn't happen. If the global flood did occur, then we'd find trilobites with modern corals and starfish and bottom-dwelling fish. However, we don't. Trilobites are only found in Paleozoic strata, showing that the geologic column represents different time periods, not simply different environments.
Minus 13 Celsius in Calgary.
Oh,
That's
wow.
cool.
Minus 13 degrees Celsius here in Calgary is extremely non-notable. My kids complain about taking jackets if it's only minus 13. But since they mentioned my city, if you happen to be in the area on February 22nd, 2018, you can come hear me give my first Paulogia-related talk. For our belated Darwin Day celebration, check out my Facebook page for details.
Somebody wants to know if Ken got his rice pudding.
Oh, don't bring up the rice pudding. No.
That's like
All right, we get enough about Ken's obsession with rice pudding when he's on the show. They're talking about desserts and emojis, so I think we can call it a day. The next thing you should be doing is heading over to Jackson Wheat's channel. If you like my videos, you're going to love his. They're short, entertaining, very well produced, and each serves as shareable go-to primers to learn everything you need to know on a specific topic. Go subscribe and binge.
Well, Paul, thanks for having me, and I'll see you around.
See you, Jackson. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe on your way over to Jackson's channel to do the same. Huge thanks as always to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Thank you everyone for watching. Until next time, later.